There are some insane misconceptions when it comes to minimum wages, and I just wanted to put out a video explaining why a $15 minimum wage could be absolutely detrimental to the United States. Now, I want to preface this video by saying that I'm not advocating for the conservative or the liberal side of politics. Rather, I'm just explaining why this one specific notion that unskilled workers should be paid $15 is the wrong idea if we want to bring our country any kind of prosperity. So, first, however, we have to start at the idea where do we get the minimum wage from? So, back in 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed as a means of addressing persistence of sweatshops or places of employment which workers who were not their primary source of income for the household were paid wages lower than what was necessary to sustain themselves. This began in Massachusetts in 1912, with other states following suit. At first, many attempts to pass similar legislation were shot down by the Supreme Court, like Atkins versus Children's Hospital and Moorhead versus New York, because the specific amount bore no relation to the type of work involved, employee capability, and unjustly prevented bargaining for contractual terms. So, however, this changed in Washington's Minimum Wages for Women Act when this state statute upheld that, concluding that this legislation was valid exercise of the state's police power to protect health and safety of women specifically. I mean, that's great. This was a horrible sweatshop conditions and the minimum wage was set. Okay, now, the minimum wage in 1938 was set to 25 cents, which is equal to $4.19 today, which is just over half of today's federal minimum wage. A quarter back in 1938, which was the wage set that allowed everyone a living wage, had the same buying power of today, about $4. Now, you'd assume that these numbers mean, oh, our buying power has gone up significantly, right? Well, no, because the cost of living has increased substantially. A house could be bought in 1938 for about $3,900, while the same house would now cost like $64,000, after accounting for inflation is more like $245,800. So, we gotta raise the minimum wage in order to account for this. Not so fast. Remember, the Fair Labor Standards Act was actually created for the eradication of poverty. Well, guess what? Poverty still existed back in 1938, and it still exists now. Increasing the minimum wage does more harm than it does good, and here's why. Studies since the 1990s on the employment effects of minimum wages points to a reduction in employment opportunities for low-skilled workers and directly affected workers. This can be explained by using a simple graph. In a free market, a wage will set itself. An employer will see, all right, how many people do I need to work, and how many people are willing to work at this wage that I set? And both will adjust for the other accordingly. However, when a minimum wage is set, that is higher than that amount that originally would have been, say $15 instead of $7.25, the employer can only hire half the amount of people. There's this insane idea that employers have infinite stacks of cash and can just accommodate to pay workers more. No, that's not how it works. So, to all the people standing on the side of Wall Street yelling, we want $15 to flip burgers! If legislation pulls through, half of you are out of a job, making zero. Unemployment rates will skyrocket in the United States if the federal minimum wage reaches that ridiculous number. A higher minimum wage will only serve to hurt the good workers. The workers you know that show up every day with a smile, they love their job, they continuously work to make their company prosper. They're gonna get the shaft. Why? Because their employer can't afford to reward them anymore. Business owners are consistently looking for workers who go above and beyond to give them raises and promotions, because those are the type of people who take their business to a next level. But once you start forcing them to pay that worker the same exact wage as the high school dropout who's just waiting for his next smoke break, the employer can't afford to reward his best workers anymore. Where the amazing employee could be making $25 an hour because that's the value he adds, instead, he's making the same as someone who's polarizing the company. Upward mobility is completely ruined, and in a way, the American dream follows suit. While I believe that everyone should have a living wage, I also believe that you should be compensated based on the value that you add to a company. If you're adding zero value, you should make $0. I don't want the people that are going above and beyond in this country to feel like they can't go any farther than they already are. People that work hard, the people that the company likes, those are the people that move up, and they tend to move up very quickly. Employers want to reward excellent work. A study was done and mentioned in a brilliant Gonzaga Law Review paper. I'll put it in the description of this video. It points to the negative effects of minimum wage increases with empirical, irrefutable data. Back in 1997, Idaho and Washington minimum wages were both at $5.15. with similar unemployment rates, Washington at 4.9% and Idaho at 5.1%. Washington began to increase its minimum wage until about 2007, while Idaho kept the original $5.15. In 2003, Washington's employment rate had risen to 7.4%, and Idaho's was still at a similar 5.2%. Idaho's minimum wage was then forced to increase due to federal regulation in 2007, and its employment rate increased. The study goes on to mention these differences were even more noticeable in the border unemployment rates. For simplicity's sake, I'll just say that Idaho's labor force was significantly healthier. Our economy needs jobs, and we need people in the labor force. We need discouraged workers to become encouraged again. We're not going to do that with a $15 minimum wage. In fact, that wage will only serve to curtail any economic progress we could have made. Increasing wages doesn't fix poverty standards. It didn't fix living back in 1938, coming out of an abysmal economy. And it certainly won't now. If we want prosperity in America, we need to look for an alternative anti-poverty policies more closely, rather than trying to raise minimum wage, which has statistically shown to only hurt the middle class. Play nice in the comments. People are gonna be rude.